Good evening. My name is Ed Henley, and I want to welcome you to the Bowen Center's professional lecture series. And tonight our presentation is a presentation from the Murray Bowen Archives Project, Advancing Bowen Theory through Murray Bowen's Archival Legacy. Our usual host, Kathleen Smith, is away attending a family funeral, so I am pleased to be our host and discussion leader this evening. And I thank Morgan Smith for her technology support. I want to introduce our speakers, and I will give a brief biography of each one of them in the order in which they will be speaking. First speaking tonight will be Kent Webb, and he works in both the organizational and mental health worlds with practices in both fields. He's an executive coach and a licensed clinical social worker, and he's got broad experience in education, both as an chief executive officer and a mental health coach. He's vice president of the Archives Project, and he's a faculty member at the Bowen Center, and his research interests are in the application of Bowen theory to gay men and to the field of leadership. Speaking next will be Catherine Rocco. Catherine is a licensed clinical social worker. She's on the faculty of the Western Pennsylvania Family Center. As I mentioned, a Murray Bowen Archives Project board member. Her interests are in the early development of Bowen theory and the preservation of his research materials at the National Library of Medicine. She has a book coming out, Making Sense of Human Life, Murray Bowen's Determined Effort Towards a Family Systems Theory. It'll be published by Taylor and Francis this coming July. Our third speaker is Joanne Bowen, PhD, former senior curator, environmental archaeology at Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, and research professor in anthropology at the College of William and Mary. She had a BA from Beloit College and MA and PhD from Brown, and currently an independent scholar. And she not only serves on the board of the Archives Project, she represents the Bowen family to this organization, as well as interfacing with the National Library of Medicine. And during her career, her primary research focused on zooarchaeology, human-animal relationships, landscape ecology, and human social systems. And since the death of Murray Bowen in 1990, she has been drawing on her curatorial background in research with historical documents to guide her work with Murray Bowen's papers. So over these decades, she has worked with the Bowen family, the National Library of Medicine, the Bowen Center, and the Archives Project, and she's currently preparing papers for transfer to the National Library of Medicine.
Ed Henley, he's the priest, he's moderating tonight.
Okay, we need to mute somebody here. Priscilla Friesen, she's got 40 years of professional life, which has been involved with Murray Bowen's theory and with the Bowen Center as a faculty member. Her research interests have included biofeedback, neurofeedback, physiology, the brain and its relationship to multi-generational family processes. Ms. Friesen has been actively involved in Murray Bowen's archives since before Murray Bowen's death in 1990. She's on the board. She works with the Bowen Center to archive and preserve its institutional legacy and to include it in the National Library of Medicine. So we look forward to exploring all aspects of Murray Bowen's archives and this archives work. And so I invite Kent Webb, if you will lead us off this evening.
So thank you very much, Ed, for that lovely welcome of our speakers. And I'm looking forward to this presentation. We've all worked hard to bring a thoughtful, in-depth description of the Murray Bowen Archives Project to you this evening. The Archives Project is very thankful to the Bowen Center for the opportunity to showcase the importance of the work being completed by the Archives Project over the last 30 years. The project exists to form and maintain viable partnerships with entities who have Murray Bowen archival materials and are committed to the effort of preserving, processing, making available, and accessible the life works of Dr. Murray Bowen. The Archives Project partners with the National Library of Medicine, the Bowen Family Trust, the Bowen Center, Andrea Schara, and Murray Bowen at this time, and we expect to have additional partnerships in the future. The Archives Project is a portal to Dr. Bowen's life works that led to the development of Bowen theory. Murray Bowen and his theory, eventually named Bowen theory, was originally titled Family Systems Theory. It's unique in the world of theories about human behavior. The uniqueness comes from the fact that Murray Bowen, the man who developed the theory, and the theory itself are two separate yet intrinsically intertwined evolving entities, much like the concept of differentiation of self. You will observe that integration in our presentation this evening. Catherine and Priscilla and Joanne have had a long history with the National Library of Medicine, the various deeds of gift, and are experts relative to the archives. Slide 1, please. You can go ahead and bring up slide 2, please. The vision of the Murray Bowen Archives Project is to make his archives available to the world to advance the understanding of his theory of human behavior, its development and integration with the natural scientists. The mission is to obtain the resources necessary to fulfill the vision, to advance scholarship, and enhance public knowledge of these archives. Next, please. The Murray Bowen Archives Project is an independent organization. It's a 501c3, and it stands alone. It's dedicated to the preservation of original materials in all medias related to Bowen family systems theory and its originator, Dr. Murray Bowen. It serves as a resource to all Bowen educational centers and researchers interested in the theory. Its vision and mission is unique among all the international networks addressing Bowen theory. Next. There are 4 deeds of gifts and 6 associated interlocking triangles. Presently, the deeds of gifts are at the National Library of Medicine regarding the life works of Murray Bowen, and more likely there will become more as time goes by. The deeds of gift are the L. Murray Bowen deed of gift, that's triangle number 1. Triangle number 2 is the deed of gift with the Bowen Center. The 3rd is with Mary Bourne, and the 4th is the Andrea Schara deed of gift. You might be wondering, what is a deed of gift? A deed of gift is a signed legal document that voluntarily and without recompense transfers ownerships of real, personal, or intellectual property, such as a gift of materials from one person or institution to another. Ownership of the materials occurs with the physical transfer to the receiving organization. After a deed of gift is completed, transfer of records can and do occur over many years. It's the case with the Williamsburg Project. Materials that are owned by the Bowen heirs and the Bowen Center. The Murray Bowen Archives Project's role in the deed of gift between National Library of Medicine and the donors is to provide financial and perhaps administrative assistance to either the donor or the recipient to make possible the transfer of materials to the National Library of Medicine, or to assist the National Library of Medicine with the cost and processing of the archival materials to make them available and accessible. This assistance may occur when either requested by the donor and or offered to the donor by the Archives Project. The Archives Project has been involved in assisting all of the present deeds of gift in the process of finding their way to the National Library of Medicine. The project anticipates that it will also play a very large role in assisting the National Library of Medicine financially with the processing of the archives once the National Library of Medicine receives all of the archival materials from the 4 present deeds of gift. Slide 5, please. Triangle number 1 is the original and primary triangle with the National Library of Medicine, the recipient of deeds of gifts from the donors, the L. Murray Bowen Gift and the Bowen Center. Triangle number 2 includes the National Library of Medicine as the recipient, the L. Murray Bowen Gift as the donor, and the Murray Bowen Archives Project as a financial supporter partnering with the donor. Slide 6. Triangle number 3 involves the National Library of Medicine as the recipient, the Bowen Center, the donor, and the Archives Project, the financial supporter partnering with the donor. Triangle number 4 includes the Bowen Center, the L. Murray Bowen Gift as the recipients, and the Archives Project as a financial supporter partnering with both gifts, with the eventual archives involved being transferred to the National Library of Medicine. Next. Triangle number 5 involves the National Library of Medicine as the recipient, the Mary Bourne Deed of Gift as the donor, and the Archives Project as the financial supporter partnering with the donor. Triangle number 6 includes the National Library of Medicine as the recipient, the Andrea Schara Deed of Gift as the donor, and the Archives Project as the financial supporter partnering with the donor. As you can see, the deeds of gift and their associated relationships, getting the deeds of gift delivered to NLM and having them become accessible to the public is legally and financially complex, and it requires a cooperative partnerships between the donor, the recipient, and the Murray Bowen Archives Project. As Bowen theory identify, relationships occur in triangles. Next. The National Library of Medicine in Bethesda, Maryland is the leading repository of medical information in the world. It serves a wide variety of health professionals, scientists, and medical educators throughout the world. Next. This library, called the National Library of Medicine, also welcomes journalists, government officials, and the public, all in the interest of improving human life and health. Among its vast holdings is a major collection of materials from the life and work of Murray Bowen. These archives, which await processing, are larger than the archives of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Bowen's gift to the world is a unified way to understand individuals, families, organizations, communities, and whole societies. Current work with his theory is extending it to consider questions of the relation of human beings to their surrounding environments. Next. Bowen family systems theory provides a unified way to understand the individual, the family, business and other organizations, communities, societies, and human beings in relation to the natural world. Next. Murray Bowen grew up on a farm in Waverly, Tennessee. His early closeness to the land and its creatures gave him a deep personal understanding of human beings as a part of all life forms, rather than separate and distinct from them. He developed a deep, lifelong interest in science in grade school. Next. After medical school and advanced training in neurology and surgery, he served in World War II. the troops he cared for in Europe suffered almost as many psychiatric casualties as those requiring surgery. He observed soldiers suffering what would later be termed post-traumatic stress disorder and determined to specialize in psychiatry. The archives contain his extensive wartime notes. Slide next. After the war, Bowen joined the first resident class at the Menninger Foundation in Kansas and remained there as a staff psychiatrist. With support from the foundation leadership, he worked toward his goal of moving Freudian theory toward an accepted science. Next. In addition to reading in psychoanalysis, he studied many sciences and the principles that governed other fields of knowledge. In the process, he replaced many of Freud's ideas with the scientific facts of evolution. As he moved towards science, his focus shifted from individuals to entire families. Books from his library that reflect his studies are a part of the Bowen Archives. In 1954, he moved to the National Institute of Mental Health. There he established the groundbreaking 5-year family study project. Mothers and later whole families moved into an inpatient unit where a family member diagnosed with schizophrenia was hospitalized. Next. This is Building 10. Bowen and his staff observed and recorded interactions and patterns of functioning in each family. The project attracted attention from around the world. Health officials from Holland and China visited, as did such pioneering American and English therapists as Virginia Satir, John Bowlby, and Don Jackson. Audio recordings from the hospital unit will allow visitors to the archives to place themselves inside the study as it unfolds. And it was on the 3rd floor that the families were hospitalized. Next. In 1959, Bowen became a clinical professor of psychiatry at the Georgetown University Medical School at a time when the field of family therapy was coming to the fore. Bowen's correspondence in the archives will offer students of the family therapy movement access to his interchanges with Satir, Johnson, and Bowlby, and such other leaders as Salvador Minuchin, Gregory Bateson, Theodore Litz, Nathan Ackerman, Jay Haley, and Carl Whitaker. Next. Bowen founded the Georgetown University Family Center to train therapists and later other professionals. There, he pioneered the use of video for teaching and for recording interviews with clients and whole families. The archives boast an extensive video materials in the various formats that were used over time. Next. These recordings allow viewers to experience Bowen's clarity of thought and are a significant source on the later development of his thinking. Next. Bowen drew from the work of significant scientists who studied human beings, as well as those who studied other aspects related to humans by evolution, to ground his theory in facts. John Calhoun, who did widely recognized work on the effects of population size on rodents, was among the featured speakers at the Family Center's annual symposium. Next. As was Paul MacLean, who did work on the evolution of the triune brain. In the 1970s, Bowen extended his theory to include emotional process in whole societies. He saw that increasing societal anxiety grew out of an exploding population faced with finite resources. This anxiety was deterring humans from pursuing solutions. Improvement would require, he wrote, a change in the basic nature of human beings. Bowen predicted humanity was moving into a crisis of unparalleled proportions, with the final major crisis coming as soon as the middle of the 21st century. Bowen theory not only could identify the challenges, but it held prospects for solutions. Next. Beginning before Bowen's death in 1990, dedicated volunteers from the Bowen family, the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family, and elsewhere have coordinated with the National Library of Medicine. Next. Later, Bowen's wife, Leroy Bowen, gave a major gift from the Bowen family to establish the Murray Bowen Archives. She also worked with volunteers to prepare a large number of Bowen's professional papers for donation to the National Library of Medicine and supported the Bowen Center's efforts to preserve audiovisual records. Next. Archives volunteers have given countless hours of hands-on work with his professional papers, correspondence, and photographs in the National Library of Medicine collection. Some have assessed audiovisual records and transferred them to the National Library of Medicine. Next. In 2008, an informal group of volunteers organized the Murray Bowen Archives Project to raise private funds to supplement the National Library's Medicine's federal dollars. For a time, Leaders for Tomorrow, a Virginia nonprofit corporation, provided a home for the project. Next. That organization is now incorporated as the Murray Bowen Archives Project. This picture is of the board of directors visiting the National Library of Medicine and engaging in the archival material. If you visit the National Library of Medicine, you will recognize this as the reading room. Next. The Archives Project was developed and is continuously expanding its website to make information about Bowen and Bowen theory available to researchers and the general public. Next. It has worked with the National Library of Medicine to open records already there to researchers. Jack Butler's book, The Origins of Family Psychotherapy, relies on archival materials from the National Institute of Mental Health Family Study Project. Next. As part of its efforts to disseminate such scholarship, the Archives Project has made Commitment to Principles, a collection of Bowen's letters annotated by Clarence Boyd, available on the website. Next. The Archives Project also has supported extensive efforts to interview professionals who knew Dr. Bowen to capture their thinking on the growth of his theory and how they benefited from learning and practicing it. For example, you can listen to interviews of Dr. Cohen, who hired Dr. Bowen for the National Institute of Medicine and his research project.
Vaccinated, but there's no.
And of Dr. Brody, who worked on the project's unit. Next. Through webinars and through presentations at professional meetings and in other settings, the Archives Project educates many audiences on the importance of Murray Bowen's archival legacy. Next. A second group of Bowen's materials, including papers from his home office and a large number discovered in the attic of his home in 2011, have not yet been transferred to the National Library of Medicine. These include notes from medical school and the Menninger Foundation and family correspondence. Next. The Archives Project is raising money for this effort, called the Williamsburg Project, to cooperate with the Bowen family in preparing these materials to be moved to the National Library of Medicine. Next. The project's vision is for this complete, extraordinary collection to be available to the world at the National Library of Medicine and online to advance understanding of Bowen's theory of human behavior, its development, and its integration with the natural sciences. Next. The project's mission is to obtain resources for these efforts to fulfill that vision, to advance scholarship, and to expand public knowledge of the archives. Next. As we seek to live healthy and productive lives in the unfolding 21st century, human beings, we're in need more than ever to understand our place in the natural order and our relationship to all other forms of life with whom we share this planet. I'd like to transition to Catherine Rocco.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Webb. All right, tonight I want to start by saying a few words about the National Library of Medicine. You've just heard quite a bit about it, but I want to talk about the History of Medicine Division. If you are a researcher, your interest is Bowen theory, how its concepts fit within the history of medicine, or you want to extend your knowledge of the rise of ideas around human behavior, I suggest familiarizing yourself with the materials there. This library is a vault of knowledge. They have manuscripts from international authors dating back 10 centuries. There are nearly 500 Western books printed before 1501. There are 57,000 books between the 16th and 18th century. There's over 400,000 titles published between 1801 and 1913. They have a vast audiovisual collection of over 10,000 prints and, audiovisuals, including Dr. Bowen's audio and videotapes, teaching videos, recordings of individual and family sessions from his NIMH project. There's over 150,000 prints and photographs, including the Andrea Schara collection, documenting Dr. Bowen's presentation at professional meetings around the country and his Georgetown Family Center activities. The History of Medicine Division at the National Library of Medicine also contains the life work of scientists such as Paul MacLean, neuroscientist known for his triune brain, and John Calhoun, ethologist and behavioral researcher, noted for his studies on population density. Both of these fellows had offices at NIMH when Bowen was there, and each one was an invited guest lecturer at Bowen Center symposiums. Bowen, MacLean, and Calhoun were interested in and respectful of the work of the other. I can well imagine the interesting exchanges between them over the years. Slide, please. Okay. One way to ease into exploring the National Library of Medicine is through their publication called Circulating Now. It is sent out several times a month. It features the staff or invited researchers to write about how they have used the materials there. The topics vary by the author's interest. You can see that in the list of recent articles here. Today, I received the latest issue on emotions and disease. It arrived too late to put on the slide, but I wanted to mention it as it is very thought-provoking. It is a discussion of the redesigned online presentation of an exhibition on this topic done 25 years ago. It explored the intersection of the mind and body, and it gives an historical perspective that is quite compatible with how Bowen would have approached that topic. So next, okay. This is a pause. Having just said how useful the History of Medicine Division is at NLM, it's now closed for renovations. So that does not mean you cannot access Bowen's materials. And here are some places you can find them. Some of them have been mentioned already. Next slide, please. The Murray Bowen Archives Project website has materials throughout its site. The Boyd book is available to download. It contains 64 of Dr. Bowen's letters over a 40-year period to colleagues, other professionals outside of psychiatry, family members who were in his Menninger and NIMH projects, along with Mr. Boyd's narrative on biographical points in Bowen's life and the principles he found in Bowen's correspondence. There's a letter in there from 1990 before Dr. Bowen died from a father from the NIMH research. he and Dr. Bowen had continued correspondence from the 1950s till right before Dr. Bowen died. Dr. Butler's book uses extensive archival references to trace the emergence of family psychotherapy in the mid-1950s on Dr. Bowen's project. Dr. Weinstein's 2013 book examines the historical shift from thinking of an individual to thinking of a family. That shift was occurring in psychiatry and the culture in the 1950s. She places Bowen as a major contributor to that cultural intellectual shift. And Dr. Weinstein had access to a wide range of materials in Bowen's archives for her research. And then there's the Family Systems Journal, a publication of the Bowen Center. It always has a section showcasing archival materials. Each publication has from the archives section. Okay. You can pause the slides for now. My work with archival materials came about serendipitously. In searching for a reference from Bowen's 1978 book, I found out that Dr. Bowen's NIMH research papers were in the Bowen garage. I asked permission of Mrs. Bowen to look at those materials. From 1993 to 2015, I made regular trips to Washington, D.C., Bethesda, Maryland, and Williamsburg, Virginia, to both review and assist processing archival materials. What I'm going to show you today are several slides I selected from archival materials. Most of them are from the NIMH records that show, I'm going to show how observations were recorded. I've mixed the slides between family diagrams, data collecting, a draft, and a letter. Slide, please. This is the earliest family diagram I have come across, dating to 1947. This was done while Bowen was a resident at Menninger. He was already seeing families on his own time. I'm showing this to recognize Bowen's use of the diagram and how it evolved over time. While this is a 4-generation diagram, here the information is basic: birth year, age, date of death, married or not, number of children. Next slide. 10 years later, in 1957, the family diagram shows the family emotional field with lots of information about the family. This diagram is of the paternal side of the green square. This family, while not part of the research families, lived on and off on Bowen's wards. There are also diagrams of this family of the maternal side and the nuclear family. During this time, Bowen was thinking about multi-generational transmission process. I think these diagrams are part of his preparing for his presentation on the etiology of schizophrenia at the American Psychiatric Association meeting, May 1st, 1957. And up here in the corner, right above the mother, the writing above the man with the green square, his mother, there's a note that says she was known to cough a lot, thought to prevent the husband from smoking. So he's recording much more information here, looking at family patterns and looking at emotional process in the family. Bowen attributes the use of the family diagram at NIMH as a new application of the tool to a family's emotional process. Next slide, please. This is a draft for an August 1955 presentation at Chestnut Lodge. Bowen, a nurse, and the social worker were invited to present on their project to an audience outside of NIMH. By this time, he had observed the family as a unit, and he was preparing to hospitalize intact families. In this draft, he is writing about upset in a family, moving among family members, and transferring to others in the environment. This came from observations of the first 3 mother-daughter families in his research. The note shows some of the data from which the concept of the family as a unit and triangles emerged. The archives contain thousands of pages like this, handwritten pages of drafts for presentations, drafts of papers, free associations as he was thinking through his thoughts, drafts of letters, memos, administrative materials, I chose this one because it gives a clear discussion of nuclear family process. Next. This is a sociogram from October 9th, 1956. There are 17 sociograms in October's records. Beginning in 1956, after the admission of an intact family, the primary treatment was a daily patient staff family meeting. One of the records made to track data at each meeting was a sociogram. A staff member who was a silent observer followed the interchanges between members at the meeting, color coding them to reflect hostile, red, neutral, green, or friendly, blue, or irrelevant exchanges. Each daily meeting was also tape recorded, and the families were to listen to these recordings before the next meeting. For analysis purposes, in addition, process notes were taken that were summarized weekly, then monthly, and then a grouping of 4 months of charting was reviewed. This sociogram has 9 members of 4 families, plus 7 staff members: psychiatrists Bowen, Brody, Dysinger, social worker Basmania, and nurses and aides. The drawing shows who talked to whom, the emotional feel of the remarks, and whether the discussion was between people or on topics outside the group, shown by the direction of arrows. In the lower right corner is a process note of a topic in the meeting. What should staff do about situations when one member of a family is found in bed with another member of another family? In the meeting notes that accompany this sociogram, the intimate behavior between daughter A and son E had been brought up at the meeting. There's gossip on the ward about the, quote, implications about the morality of the incident. How this was addressed shows up at the meeting the next day, October 10th. Bowen invited Dr. Savage and Dr. Jenkins, administrators at NIMH, to attend the meeting that day when the issue is taken up with the immediate people involved in the presence of the 2 administrators. The issue is opened in the larger system of the institution. A feedback loop is created. By inviting the higher-ups, they are aware of the issue directly, and that was a principal openness of Bowen's, not through an administrative chain of gossip. They can see for their own judgment how it's being addressed, and their presence gives a reality notice to daughter A and son E that what happens on the unit is open to discussion in that larger system, which has the ultimate responsibility for the treatment of the family and to its funders, Congress. Next slide. This is a sociogram from a year later when 3 families attended. There are 2 psychiatrists, a head nurse, a nurse, 2 aides, and a social worker at the meeting, in addition to 5 family members. In the December records, there are 21 sociograms in the archives. This one visually captures the dynamics of the meeting. The red lines are going between parents, Mrs. D and Mr. D, between 2 fathers, Mr. D and Mr. E. Meanwhile, daughter D sits between the 3 discussants reading a magazine. Her comments in the meeting are marked as irrelevant with the wavy blue lines. The meeting notes indicate the content was an emotional issue that emerged in the meeting. Mrs. D questioned how to be objective when emotion. A question for the ages. Next slide. This slide is an example of a chart on interactions between the D parents and their daughter for 22 days of January. It was created by the social science analyst. This is another method of the record keeping. Her name was Claire Thompson, and she was a silent observer on the project. Again, color coding is used to indicate hostile, neutral, or friendly responses. The information was called from the nurse's notes and the family meeting notes. The color coding makes it easy to track similarities and differences between the parents and daughter. The handwritten notes on the bottom give a summary. There were 8 days in which aggression in the daughter and fighting between the parents coincided. 8 days when it did not. 5 days when the daughter and parents were friendly. And 1 day when parents were upset and daughter was friendly. To sum up, data, observations of behavior, communication exchanges, research thinking, was collected and retained in doctor's progress notes, nurses' daily charting, 3 shifts, process notes of the daily family meetings, audio recordings, social work summaries, sociograms, weekly and monthly summaries, and presentations within and outside NIMH. Next slide. This and the next slide are diagrams of the live-in families from the project's start in November 1954 to its end in December 1958. The first three families, who are marked here as A, B, and C, were mother-daughter pairs. Two were admitted in 1954 and one in January 1955. By March of 1955, Bowen was forming the hypothesis for the family as a unit and thinking through a new treatment plan to go with it. The first family with a father, mother, impaired child, and a sibling were admitted in December of 1955. Another intact family was admitted in 1956. It's clear with these diagrams that Bowen was also studying sibling position. Family A and Family D were on the project for 36 months. Next slide. No families were admitted in 1957. It was a year for stabilizing the project within the clinical center, with consistent staff understanding the protocols, trained in observation. The nurses' notes show the difference by having chart notes written on families rather than the individual family members. So you can see the change of when Bowen was looking at the dyad, the mother and daughter, to when he's looking at the family. It shows up in how the nurses were recording their daily observations. Beginning in 1958, Bowen was aware the project would end in December. He tried some variations in participation. This was done with creative use of admissions and discharges. In the G family, the son was hospitalized elsewhere, and the parents attended the daily family staff meetings. Their other children were not present. Another family lived on the unit daily. That would be the J family with a 10-year-old autistic son. The parents and son attended the daily meetings. 10 families in all lived on the unit or lived in by daily participation on the ward and in the family therapy meetings. These were the core of the research families. Several of these families continued outpatient treatment with Dr. Bowen after the end of the project. And as I mentioned earlier, as late as a few months in 1990, before Dr. Bowen's death, one of the fathers in the family was still in correspondence with him. The live-in families were deliberately selected to be small families. With the 8 outpatient families that were part of the study, there was more flexibility regarding family constellation. One of those had 10 children. 12 families had detailed outpatient workups of a few days to several weeks. This data contributed to historical data. None of these families were in psychotherapy, and none were included as part of the study. Next slide. This last slide is a letter from 1960, after the project had ended, 6 years before the publication of the first theoretical concepts. The letter is in response to a question about Bowen's use of the phrase emotional divorce. Here he gives a summary of observations from his research that led to that understanding. He notes, quote, "I don't think we can speak of emotional divorce as a known or recognized entity, but rather a descriptive term that was seen in all the research families." He goes on to give contrasting examples from the research families, noting some spouses had the look of closeness, but not the actions that generate it, except for exchanges about their schizophrenic child. Other spouses were highly conflictual with cool distance between them, but looking on the surface as cordial, gracious, and friendly. The letters in the archives are rich in such descriptions. All right, so in conclusion, some of my takeaways from this journey are that outpatient families did better than inpatient ones, no matter how much the effort to make the ward a naturalistic environment. Another is that precursors to all the 8 concepts exist in the archives going back as far as 1940s. It is possible to trace Bowen's research method, and he is consistent throughout his life with this. He was a careful researcher. He tested all assumptions, setting up experiments with actual families to teach him what the facts of human behavior were and how the family was a system. Today, I presented a few selected materials from the NIMH papers that comprise about 8 of the 60+ boxes at NLM. The collection at Williamsburg is of comparable size. There is significant potential in those materials, both at NLM and at Williamsburg, to advance the theory even further. You will now hear from Dr. Joanne Bowen, who wears two distinct hats, that of board member of the Archives Project Group and that of Bowen family representative to the totality of the segments comprising the Archives Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So over his lifetime, Murray Bowen's odyssey took him to psychiatry. Beginning as a young professional, he recorded his experiences. Working tirelessly, Murray Bowen observed all around him, much like Darwin. We, his heirs, professionals, and NLM's curators have inherited the challenge of preserving his legacy for future generations. Next slide. This diagram shows his legacy includes audiovisual and clinical records, also manuscripts, photographs, research and administrative records, as well as correspondence in every category. Compared to many researchers of his stature, he published relatively little. Instead, virtually every night he worked, typing with his 2 fingers, manuscripts, memos, and letters that ranged from 1 to 10 or more single-spaced pages. These records are unique in the medical and scientific world, and that families are represented in every category. Separately, each category is a lens into how he worked and discovered new facts. In their totality, they reveal his inductive approach, how he practiced science. Where nothing was fixed, there was always more to know if one could only observe, analyze, refine, and never assume one knew the answer. So next, please. This image shows the collection the Bowen family deeded to the National Library of Medicine. On top are the professional records his wife, Leroy Bowen, transferred. And as you've heard, they include the NIH research, clinical records, manuscripts, military records, and correspondence. On the bottom half are family records Leroy Bowen set aside for her children. In addition to these records, when my siblings and I cleaned out our family home, we discovered a large cache of records dating from the 1940s and 50s. Among them are medical school notes, photographs, military, administrative, and clinical records, as well as a number of manuscripts and published papers. Together, this collection of over 75 banker's boxes is comparable to what is already at NLM. As the Bowen family representative, I am responsible for completing work to transfer these records. To enable me to continue work, I moved these records to Williamsburg, Virginia, where I live. These materials are rich, broad, and deep for anyone wanting to discover how Bowen thought and worked, how his theory evolved, grounded in his upbringing in Waverly, Tennessee. I'm going to give you 2 brief examples. So next, please. He was born in Waverly, the eldest son of Jess and Maggie May Bowen. As a county seat, this town served as a busy social and economic center. The Love family, who migrated from Michigan soon after the Civil War, established a family business that continues today. His father, who was born nearby, became a partner after marrying Maggie May. On the left is the first Love Bowen store in 1879. On the right is a picture of town in 1938. So next, please. When in Michigan, the Luffs were shipbuilders. In Waverly, they built homes and made coffins, operating out of the store until 1938, when Jess Bowen purchased the old hotel. Here's a picture of the newly renovated funeral home and ambulance. So next, please. As did many town residents, the Bowen family lived on the outskirts of town, where they maintained a small farm to produce their food. Here's a picture of their farm in 1938, and on the right is young Murray and his grandfather, Lucius Luff. Note he's feeding chickens. Murray Bowen has written about how this life taught him the importance of the connection to the land, family, and community. He wrote about how this understanding led him to develop his concept known as societal emotional process. Next, please. Bowen passed on this gift. Every summer as young children, we made the journey to Waverly, where we learned about family, funerals, the store, and the community. As part of our education, he took us to important places, such as the farm on the left where he grew up. Here is our family gathered on the porch during one of our visits. So next, please. Records reveal his odyssey. On the left is an undated manuscript describing a nodal event where at 16, he accompanied a driver to take a 15-year-old girl to a Nashville hospital. She had taken ill and slipped into a coma. By early that evening, she died, surrounded by staff. He wrote, "I watched them, unable to help her. I observed, does man have to be this helpless? There must be a way we can know about these problems." Then and there, he resolved to go to medical school, motivated to know more and more to heal the things that were poorly understood. Notably, his focus was on the staff and medical community, not the girl. He remarked how his motivation to solve difficult and poorly understood conditions was deep. This event foretold his future, how he could focus on his system, even as intense emotionality played out in front of him. He went on to become a physician. Here he is in 1939 as an intern at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. The inscription on the back of this picture, "Bellevue Psych," foretold his future. This story foretells another of his gifts, how he observed, learned, and practiced science, how his inductive approach was his pathway, his guidepost. He never stopped, attempting to distinguish fact from emotion. It is my belief that his archives reveal how his brain worked, a pathway for current and future research to take his theory into areas he had yet to conceive. Next. The next example comes from the family papers. Beginning in 1959, after putting in thousands of hours on other people's families, he decided to research his own family. He wrote to libraries, historical societies, and distant relatives. He knew a lot about his maternal lineage, as his mother had maintained relationships with her Michigan relatives, but he knew absolutely nothing about his paternal lineage. He knew the cutoff was deep. His grandfather, William Reese Bowen, who died when his father was only 2, never spoke of his family. So Bowen went to work, and over 3 decades, he developed relationships with distant cousins. There are at least 8 banker's boxes of records in Williamsburg, a treasure trove for anyone wanting to understand how to research their family's multi-generational transmission process, to discover how anxiety and immaturity travel unrecognized through generations. These records reveal how he built a factual history. In a letter he wrote, "Before my family research at NIMH, I was little interested in my own family. Since then, I have devoted vacations and trips to this effort." Comparing his work to genealogists, he remarked, "I am more interested in the total family of man than the outcome of special members of the family. That mediocrity and ungreatness are the handmaidens of greatness, and that one cannot be understood without the other." So here's a picture of Bowen with his parents during their 60th wedding anniversary. On his left is Jamie Grady, a distant Bowen who wrote a genealogy that opened the door to his paternal past. So next, please. Here are 2 pictures of one of his trips to the Pleasant Valley Cemetery where his grandfather lived. He is buried in the stone, enclosed stone plot. So next, please. Here again is Jamie Grady, who's being honored by our family. On the right is a family diagram that takes the Bowen clan back to 1699, when Moses Bowen immigrated from Wales to Pennsylvania, then down the Shenandoah Valley to settle in southwestern Virginia, and his descendants into Tennessee. This research produced information that his grandfather was orphaned at 18. He married 4 times, the last to Priscilla Griffin, who gave birth to Jess. When Jess was only 2, his father died. Children from his former marriages immigrated to Texas, leaving Priscilla alone with her son. Bowen reported how his discovery had a profound impact on his father. At last, Jess Bowen could fill a deep emotional gap. He had married into a family who knew their past and had become a partner in their business. This information gave him knowledge of who he was. Equally important, this knowledge was given to him by his son, Murray, who had left the home and family he loved to follow his own star. So to conclude, archival work on these records is ongoing, first in Williamsburg to complete work to transfer papers to NLM. Subsequently, the work will focus on the family papers and photographs for transfer. So stay tuned for updates. So Priscilla will now describe the additional deeds of gift.
Sorry. I'm going to be describing the other 3 deeds of gifts. And as you look at this slide, the darkened arrows indicate the collections that have been transferred to the National Library of Medicine. Bowen Center's audiovisual collection deed of gift and Murray Bowen deed of gift are at the National Library of Medicine. The Andrea Schara deed of gift has been digitized, processed, and we're in the final stages of the identification of people, almost completed. When this is completed, Andrea Schara will transfer this collection to the National Library of Medicine. The large circle above at the top, the administrative institutional records of the Bowen Center, is the part of the collection that we're presently working on. Next slide, please. Yeah. Murray Bowen co-founded the Minnesota Institute of Family Dynamics in 1980. The training program she developed gave Dr. Bowen a unique platform to develop and synthesize his ideas in the last decade of his life. He reported that going to Minneapolis 4 times a year gave him a chance to think away from the organizational pressures of the Georgetown Family Center. Murray Bowen audio taped all of these meetings and transcribed them. Dr. Bowen gave Mary the rights to develop these materials for publication. While the book she outlined did not develop, she did publish 3 chapters in Bringing Systems Thinking to Life by Ona Bregman and Charlie White. After Mary's death in 2018, her daughter, that you see here, Louisa Cannon, organized the collection to prepare it for transfer. Joanne Bowen was instrumental in guiding Louisa and the NLM to prepare this collection for its present home at NLM, the National Library of Medicine. What you see in the slide is the September 2019 occasion when Louisa and her husband, Pat, hand-delivered the materials to the National Library of Medicine, welcomed by Rebecca Warlow, the head of the archives section of the History of Medicine at the National Library of Medicine. Next slide, please. Alongside of her position as audiovisual coordinator at the Georgetown Family Center, Andrea Schara, the photographer, documented the Georgetown Family Center from 1976 to 1990. Her photographs include documentation of symposiums, the guest speakers, the training programs, Family Center social events, and out-of-town meetings near the end of Dr. Bowen's life when she traveled with him. The photographs highlight the nature of the relationships at the Bowen Center and visually parallel the development of Bowen theory in the Bowen Family Center period. Almost 3,000 photographs are digitized and we are completing the identification into the metadata. Again, when this is completed, Andrea will donate this collection. Copies of this photograph collection will be made available for the public through the Bowen Center, the Murray Bowen Archives Project, the Bowen family, and of course, Andrea for her use. Next, please. Now, in this slide, you see two large collections that are included in the Bowen Center deed of gift: the audiovisual collection and the institutional records. Dr. Michael Kerr and Ruth Sager developed the original Bowen Center deed of gift in 2007 for the transfer of an initial portion of the audiovisual collection that you see on the left. The Bowen Center maintained responsibility for the actively used teaching and rental tapes. This collection originally was housed at both the Bowen Center and the Bowen home and was incorporated into one at the Bowen Center after Dr. Bowen's death. In 2004, the Bowen family deeded their rights to the audiovisual collection to the Bowen Center to support their application for federal grants to preserve the deteriorating tapes. This grant effort was unsuccessful. The second portion of the deed of gift on the right, the institutional records, is presently housed at the Bowen Center and includes the institutional history of Dr. Bowen's professional life after NIMH. This includes his various institutional associations: Georgetown University Medical Center, Medical College of Virginia, Walter Reed, American Family Therapy Association, and others. This collection shows the organizations, the projects, the ways in which Bowen theory developed from 1959 to 1990. These records also illustrate Dr. Bowen's work style, working at home with clerical assistance from the center. Presently, the family representative is working to separate the personal Bowen intellectual property from the organizational Bowen intellectual property, and to transfer these materials directly to NLM under the Bowen family deed of gift. Now, these deed of gift delineations are important for historical organization of materials at the National Library of Medicine. This is the collection we are presently working on. Next slide, please. Now, technology has been central to Dr. Bowen's professional life, beginning with the large reel-to-reel tape deck that was referred to sitting in the middle of the common space of his groundbreaking NIMH study. He recorded the life on the inpatient project. The audiovisual collection illustrates the development of theory over 40 years, from the robust elucidating the nature of the family in the early multiple family groups to the teaching tapes that describe the theory. The collection includes interview tapes such as the Kerr-Bowen series and the basic series, Dr. Bowen teaching during the postgraduate programs, discussions with Dr. Bowen and scientists, think tank meetings, and of course, Andrea Schara's taping of Bowen at out-of-town meetings. All of these tapes are now safely in the temperature-controlled space at the National Library of Medicine. A special thanks to Ann McKnight, who supported completing the transfer of the audiovisual collection in December of 2019, which is depicted here on the screen. A special thanks to Amy Post, who assisted the Bowen Center initially to digitize their teaching tapes for their own use, as well as to organize the entire collection for transfer to NLM. We are very fortunate these tapes have survived until the digital technology emerged. The cost today per tape is significantly less than 30 years ago, and digitizing is permanent. A next step is to digitize all 700 hours at NLM, transcribe them, and do the closed captioning required for public use. In addition, translating the tapes into digital format facilitates the searches across media, video, manuscripts, correspondence, photographs, creating a multimedia access to the entire Murray Bowen Archives collection. You can see videos today that you've not seen before, as you see on the screen here at our murraybowenarchives.org. On our webpage, you will find edited clips and transcripts from the Bowen's teaching in the postgraduate program during the 1980s and from out-of-town meetings. In addition, you can go to the Bowen Center website and gives you free access to teaching and interview tapes. There is a lot to explore. Next, please. The records currently at the Bowen Center begin when Dr. Bowen first associated with the Georgetown University Medical Center. He trained psychiatric residents and other interested professionals who began to apply and develop the theory. From this group, he developed his first faculty. These records document the growth of family therapy and its popularity, the increase in professionals in training during the 1970s. The 1980s saw the expansion of theory and the shift to position the theory more associated with science. These records dominate this vital time of theory expansion. The family programs at Georgetown expanded to create the Georgetown Family Center in its own space on MacArthur Boulevard, while still a part of the psychiatry department. The organizing principles of this organization was based in theory, seeing the organization as an emotional system. It was the responsibility, and is a responsibility, for each member to be a defined self led by Bowen, who distinguished his leadership by the focus on his own differentiation of self. A theory focus guided the decisions of the organization and are present in these records. Dr. Bowen described his organizational hope for the Family Center to be a citadel of differentiation. The records include the organizational documents, Bowen correspondence in service of the organization, such as letters to scientists, correspondence for the American Therapy Association, of which Bowen was a founding member and first president. It includes administration of the training programs, conferences, and research. There are materials published by the Bowen Center, the early symposium proceedings, and the Family Center report. The Murray Bowen Archives Project and the Bowen family are presently working on two projects. In the slide, you see the file drawer at the top left corner here, the green slips of paper. Joanne Bowen, as the family representative, is identifying materials that are Bowen intellectual property, such as early manuscripts or correspondence that are not related to the organization, either preceding 1959 or materials that were brought to the Family Center for early training purposes. These will be sent directly to NLM under the Bowen family deed of gift. When this is completed by September, a project for processing the Bowen Center institutional records will begin. The Murray Bowen Archives Project, in conjunction with the Bowen Center, will then develop a plan to digitize all the records for the Bowen Center's own archive, as well as for the National Library of Medicine. This past month, the inventory of the Bowen Library began. This inventory will document the materials contained in the Bowen Library, the one that you see. It includes books by the family therapy leaders, Family Center symposium speakers, dissertations on Bowen theory, and materials published by the Bowen Center, as well as other scientific books informing Bowen theory. National Library of Medicine will select materials to then be transferred to NLM. Digitizing materials published by the Bowen Center will be processed for the Bowen Center's own archives as well as NLM. So as you can see, this is a big project. So much has been done to organize and transfer materials already. Mrs. Bowen organized and transferred the voluminous materials in her home with the assistance of Lee Kelly and other volunteers before her death in 2011. Joanne Bowen is working to complete the professional papers in Williamsburg, and now the Bowen Center is getting organized for transfer. When these two final collections are transferred to NLM, then the processing begins with the entire collection. It is the ultimate goal of the Murray Bowen Archives Project to financially support and with volunteer effort the processing of the entire collection, and to digitize the collection to make it available online for access to the world. It's been 32 years since Dr. Bowen's death. These records hold new ideas. They communicate a new way of thinking. They contribute to the thinking today and will contribute to the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our presenters this evening, because you've explored the archives in many dimensions, and both in terms of the materials themselves, the life of Murray Bowen, and the development of his thinking. We'd like to enter into a time of some discussion, some question and answer, and I invite Morgan Smith to pin our 4 presenters up onto the screen, and you can let me off. And if you would like to raise your hand, go down to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen with your mouse, and then you can click on reactions, then click on raise hand. And then when you do that, I will see your name pop up in order, and I will be able to call on you. And I see Kathleen Colley has raised her hand. Kathleen, you'd like to address anyone in particular or all?
Well, I would like to, I'm known for being overly positive, but this was fantastic. And I'm chair of the outreach at the Bowen Center, and this will be an amazing addition to the website in terms of this lecture. I think I finally am starting to understand how everything comes together. This presentation from a historical perspective and the way it was outlined, I can't say enough. So I will step away, or I will say more than I should.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Carrie Collier.
Yeah, I just want to say really quickly, I mean, I'm Dr. Collier, the director of the Bowen Center. I didn't say anything in the beginning, but I just thought it was an excellent presentation. I loved the triangles in the beginning. I think that really captured the complexity and the many years of what this has taken, and the process and the hard work and dedication of these individuals here on the screen to make this happen. The archival material, to me, is just a gift that keeps on giving. It's always going to be around. It's just full of facts and Dr. Bowen's thinking. And, I just really enjoyed everybody's presentation here. I am so pleased to have it, have been able to watch it tonight. And I can't say enough either. So I appreciate everyone for presenting. And I'm going to let other people go, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Catherine Cott. You need to unmute, Catherine. There you go.
I decided to throw my iPad on the table first. Thank you. What an excellent talk, and how far this project has come. I remember the early days, people trying to sort of puzzle out how exactly these deeds of gift would work, and so forth. I'm curious, is anyone going to be presenting about the archives at the international conference coming up in June?
I believe Kent Webb is.
Great.
Yes. I think on the last day, maybe the last presentation.
Great. That's great. Yeah. So that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have time for a few more. Any comments that anybody would like to make? Okay, Cynthia Larkby.
Thank you very much, not just for the presentation tonight, but for all the many people, many people over years who have laid the beginnings of this project and shaped it. It's a massive effort and it will continue for a long time. I'm sorry to ask about something that you didn't talk about, but as somebody who worries about this in our own organization, I am curious what methods of raising money to facilitate this massive project of transferring things to the NLM and then making them digitized and available to the public. This is a lot of money. So can you please say more about your efforts to raise money to support this? Anybody?
Well, perhaps Kent, would you like to say a little bit about that?
Certainly. We have formed a National Library Medicine Initiative group at the Murray Bowen Archives Project, in which we are putting together our presentation to approach foundations, families of wealth, and other organizations to be a sponsor for the processing of the archives. So that process will probably begin in just a year or so. As soon as the Williamsburg project materials are in the process of being processed and transferred, is when we'll begin the solicitation for large donations of money. I think it's anticipated that it will be in the millions of dollars, and hopefully things will proceed as fantastically as we anticipate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Miller? Sally?
Yes. Now I understand in times past why I never could get that little hand raised, and I saw you have to click on react, and I wouldn't have ever thought that's what I needed to click on too. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for the hard work, because it definitely was hard work to pull everything together that you all have. And I'm reminded of 2011, I believe, when I got together a plenary for AFTA, the American Family Therapy Academy, and it was Joanne and other family members and Priscilla and Andrea, and how we all worked for 1 year putting everything together for that presentation for that organization. And I have fond memories of that. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you. And Claudia. Unmute Claudia.
Sorry, I'm a student at FAU in Florida, and I was very interested in, the Bowen studies, and I'm in my last year for social work, just my bachelor's, but I enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. The information was very informative. And I wanted to ask you guys, I know that there's a lot of information on the website, but with Bowen studies, how he used to do it, like he used to study families or bring the full family to specific areas now obviously families go to counseling and everything, but you don't really see where they're researching like a whole family, which I know times have changed from before and now. Do they do that? Do you guys do that? Or do they have a place where they do studies for families, like for families, say one member has bipolar or just a different type of disorder, or all members have anxiety? Do they do that to see, to basically see how they can help the family or to get more information.
Okay, let's see, who might want to take you on here? Yes, let's see. Some of the history of how this went, maybe Catherine, you could say what was possible then and what is possible now.
I'm not sure, Ed, I understood your question. You know, the National Institute of Mental Health was an incredible place for people to bring their ideas, although like any place, you can bring some ideas and they're welcomed, and then there is a boundary to that. And the idea of studying schizophrenia was very much welcome. Establishing a different theory, even today, is difficult. That's a whole different ballgame to do something like that. So I have to say that, you know, Bowen tried to advance Freudian theory, and when that was not feasible, he then recognized that he was onto information that would lead to a new theory. So I would say that look at your own family. Your own family is a laboratory. You can start there. And if you learn how Bowen theory looks at families, and you can take some of that information for yourself and just start there. And then if you work with families, those of you who do, it's terrific. I thoroughly enjoyed my years of working with families because they taught me so very much. And it was congruent with what I had been learning in Bowen theory.
I enjoy the echo map and the genograms. Those are excellent ways to see generational, you know, issues or mental health issues, things like that. So yeah.
Thank you, Claudia. We've got a few minutes left. Lillian Rosenbaum.
Oh, let me take this flag down here. It's fascinating for me to sit here and watch all this and remember when Dr. Bowen and I used to meet, the two of us, in the basement in St. Mary's, the nursing school at Georgetown. 60, I just did the arithmetic, 60 years ago. And there was a part of me, I'm looking at all of your amazing presentations, and I'm thinking, did Murray really think it would get to this? And then I'm looking at things like Catherine just showed. He did, because he wouldn't have taken all those meticulous notes if he didn't think it would go to somewhere. I also think taking all those notes helped him to think about what he was thinking in terms of systems. And he could dismiss things, even if he dismissed it incorrectly. Like he once said to me when I said something about genetics, and he said, "Oh, Lil, that's a cop-out." Well, you know, genetics is not a cop-out now, but but he had this amazing wide perspective, and also this very amazing focus on what he was doing and where he was going. And I personally, 60 years ago, could not have imagined this presentation with all of you amazing people saying and doing the amazing work you're doing, yes, and getting into National Library of Medicine. It's absolutely amazing. I'm very, very, very impressed. And I think, as the old saying goes, in my family, we talk about when people are, quote, on the other side, meaning they already died. If Dr. Bowen's watching from the other side, he's very proud of the family, like Dr. Bowen, Joan Bowen, and all of you. So great. Thanks for letting me know about this.
Thank you for your historical perspective as well. Alan Enton.
Lillian, you stole some of my thunder because as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Wisconsin, working with Carl Whitaker, the first day I got there, we had a guest speaker, some character who was really out of place in Whitaker territory. And that person was Dr. Murray Bowen. And little did I think then that by the end of the year that I would have applied for a job at the Medical College of Virginia to work with Dr. Bowen. I became a faculty member. My biggest disappointment was when the administration of the university chose not to, or the Department of Psychiatry chose not to implement a family therapy program and bring Dr. Bowen and really the staff of what became the Family Center in DC was going to move to Richmond, Bud Andres and other people to move here to establish the family program at VCU. It became the Virginia Commonwealth University, and I was on the faculty and stayed for 6 years working with Dr. Bowen, which really changed my life as a person, personally, professionally, and in all ways, meeting some wonderful people, Joanne, Andrea, and others, you. And so it was an amazing perspective. And I thought when I was going to say how many years that was, you outdid me by saying 60 years.
Okay, Lillian, gotcha. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Ann McKnight, you'll be the last one. I think Catherine's got something to say, and we want a couple of minutes for Kent Webb at the end.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the perseverance, the careful research, the incredible organization that has gone into making the Archives Project so effective. And I know we tried to do our best at the Bowen Center to contribute to that, but it was a small part, I think, of this overall effort. And the way that I've thought about this is that the Archives Project is securing the legacy of Murray Bowen, and with all of his rich trove of writings and photographs and history. And the Bowen Center is sort of a complementary aspect to the archives, where we at the Bowen Center are trying to put Bowen theory in the world of today. And I think they go hand in hand with each other as two initiatives that are both securing the legacy of Dr. Bowen and promoting Bowen theory in the world. So I just think it's a very important complementarity. And I thank you all for your rich efforts.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, you put your hand up.
Yes, thanks. I wanted to go back to Dr. Larkby's question. Thank you so much for asking that. Yes, that's always present. How will this continue? How can we get all this done? And one of the issues is the complexity of what's trying to be done by this organization is so deep and broad, and it's hard to convey that to people in a casual conversation. There's really no elevator speech to say, well, the Archives Project does da 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 in a sentence. It's very complex. It has multiple layers to it. So I appreciate that you asked that. I can tell you the board is committed. The board makes donations regularly. The board is committed to this project. There have been webinars that have been fundraisers. So that's something that is always on the mind of this organization to advance this project. Honestly, when I was talking about where you could find archival materials with the library closed, and I did that slide on what's on the Murray Bowen Archives website, and you can download a whole book with 64 letters. Honestly, I did have to restrict myself from saying donations are welcome. But thank you for the question,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Larkin.
Catherine. Yeah, we'll give Kent the last word, and then we'll be signing off for the evening. Okay, unmute Kent.
Could you put out the slides, please? So what's coming from TMBAP, the Murray Bowen Archives Project? We'll be having our 2023 webinar announcement coming out soon, which we've moved our webinars to be hosted around the time of Dr. Bowen's birthday in late January. Increased scholarship programs will be developed and made available. New oral histories will be recorded. Coming soon will be a new website with increased archival materials, new branding, increased communication from the Murray Bowen Archives Project about what we're doing and the progress that we've made and updates on various projects. You'll also be getting updates about our relationship with the National Library of Medicine and the deeds of gifts, and the resource development team and the archival fundraising plans and progress. There will be updates related to those aspects of the Archives Project as well. Next. So just a few calls to action. We always need volunteers, and you can contact Amy Post at apost@murraybowenarchives.org. You can also donate money. You can spread the word. You can watch this recording, and beyond all else, use the archives. Next. Upon conclusion of this evening's presentation, I and the Murray Bowen Archives Project Board of Directors wants to thank, first and foremost, the National Library of Medicine for recognizing the value and importance of preserving and making accessible Dr. Bowen's works. To the Bowen family for its dedication to serving and seeing his entire collection that it be preserved. To the Bowen Center for its interest in inviting this organization to discuss its work and the complexities of the National Library of Medicine archives related to the professional works of Dr. Murray Bowen, and for partnering with us to get his records at the Bowen Center transferred to the National Library of Medicine. To Andrea Schara for her documentation of Dr. Bowen's Odyssey, to her photography and her partnering with the Murray Bowen Archives Project. Another partnering effort and thanks goes to Mary Bourne and her daughter, Louisa Cannon, for bequeathing Dr. Bowen's work and quickly getting it transferred to the National Library of Medicine. And of course, to Katie Long, who put together the slides and their content that I presented earlier this evening. And last but not least, of course, our many volunteers and stakeholders and donors that have spanned over 30 years that have made available, kept this organization going, has brought it to where we are today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks for coming, and we hope to see you on the website.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of our presenters and invite our entire audience to future public lectures of the professional lecture series of the Bowen Center. So thank you all, and we will sign off for the evening. Thank you.